All right. Welcome to a special edition of Sermon Leftovers focused on marriage. And I've bribed Brenda to be here. And Brenda and John are both going to be joining us today. So I'd love to begin with, if you could just briefly share a little bit of your story, how you guys came together, and just a little bit about your marriage now.
Okay.
Phil. That's how we came together.
That's the short answer. You want to start a little bit, and then I'll finish?
Well, I was a widow in 2016, and I had no interest whatsoever in dating ever again. And then I got a call from my son, and we had this nice conversation, and then at the end, he said, "Mom, what do you think about dating?" And I said, "Well, we've had this conversation." And I said, "Why are you asking?" He said, "Well, somebody called me." I said, "Well, first of all, who's somebody?" And he said, "Well, Phil Severn called me, and he thinks he has somebody that might be a good match for you." And then I allowed Micah to give Phil my number, and then Phil called me and was like a giddy junior higher on the phone, actually, giggling, telling me
right now.
telling me all of these wonderful things about this guy. And come to find out later, the only thing he told John was, she has 8 kids and lots of grandkids.
And an amazing woman that'd be a good match.
And so, anyway, I agreed to let Phil give John my number. And then it was actually February 12th, 3 years ago, that I got the first text from this guy.
All right. And I became a widower in 2020 and was perfectly satisfied being single for about 2.5 years. And then was talking to Phil. He knew that I wanted to try to find somebody. And I told him about some of the ways I was going about that. And I said, "Unless you know somebody." And he said, "I think I do." And so I did get Brenda's phone number. I texted her, asked her if she'd be willing just to get together and listen to each other's stories. And it kind of took off from there. We dated for about 4 months and then got married. And so now we've been married for about 2.5 years. And it's been a wonderful journey so far, and I expect it'll continue to get better.
Awesome. And it was fun. Brenda would text me, and I wouldn't share with John what Brenda was saying, and John would talk to me, and I wouldn't share with Brenda what John was saying. And
Except that the whole time Phil said, "I don't want to be in the middle of this," even though he was in the middle of it.
I didn't want to be passing along between the two of you. So, all right. So, real quick, 2 weeks ago, I preached a sermon on loving leadership, and last week you preached a sermon on loving submission. And I thought it'd be good to explore those ideas a little more together. So in Ephesians 5, before Paul dives into the specifics of marriage, he says, submit yourselves one to another. And then he goes into what that looks like in different contexts, in your marriage relationship and parenting. And then when we think about that idea of mutual submission, of loving leadership and submission, how do you think they go together in a marriage, that idea of loving leadership and submission?
All right. Well, we should always start with food. So it's kind of like peanut butter and chocolate, like in a Reese's peanut butter cup. For those of you who are old enough, you remember the commercial, and 2 people bumped into each other. And I think your peanut butter is in my chocolate. I think your chocolate is in my peanut butter. So they're complement, and that's the word we use, a complementary relationship. But I think we can think of it this way, that the two together make a greater impact or have a greater impact than either one could individually. And so they fit together. If a husband leads well and the wife submits well, then they're able to do more together and to reflect God's character more together than they could individually.
And Brenda's nodding in agreement. And I would agree too. My wife definitely makes me better. So she's up in the sound booth right now, hopefully nodding. She is. Okay. And then someone in the Sermon Leftovers asked this question. What are some examples of loving leadership and submission in your marriage? And how has that changed in different stages of your life? So, Brenda, if you could rewind all the way back to you're a little older than me, so a little further back to before you were married, how would you say your view on submission in marriage, how would you describe that before you got married, and how do you think it's changed over the years?
Well, it's changed dramatically. I grew up in a broken home. Dad wasn't in the home. My mom was very domineering. I also attended a very legalistic church that had very much the idea of the doormat submission. So he says, you do. And so when Scott and I got married, I very much felt that way. I felt like I had to live that way. Not any fault of Scott's at all. He never put that on me. That was just all I knew. I had never seen a godly marriage lived out. And so honestly, for the first 10 years of our marriage, whatever he said, yep, it's all good. But then I got to the point where it was like, wait a minute, something's not right here. And like I said, it was not anything on Scott. I had never spoke up. I had never said anything. But in my mind, because of my history, I thought if I say something or if I disagree, he's going to leave, because that's what had happened with my folks. And so as I matured in the faith and got into God's word more, I realized that that was not at all what God had in mind when he talked about submission. And I think when you learn that, I learned to open up to Scott and to voice my opinions, and he heard them, and we were able to work through things that we hadn't worked through in years, just because I had never spoken up. And I realized that when I put myself under God and allow him to lead and guide my husband, and put myself under as well, and allow him to lead and guide me, and we can work together as a team, and it works much better.
Yeah. And how about you, John? How did your views of loving leadership change over the years?
Yeah, I'd say pretty similar. I went to a similar type church. And then my dad, I think, grew up with his mom kind of ruling the house. And in his mind, he determined that when he had his own house, he would be the ruler of the house. And then he went into the Army for 21 years, and that kind of fed into that as well. So never saw a really good example. My dad was very authoritarian, and what he said went, and most of the time it was what he wanted, what he decided. Even though there was love in the house, that was just the example that I saw. So really what I came away with from that was, I don't know what it's supposed to be, but it's not supposed to be that. And so growing up in a Christian home and then Christian college and then headed into ministry, my wife, Carol, on the other hand, grew up in a home very similar to Brenda's, but abusive, alcoholic father, and a mom who made up for that by doing everything for the kids and just trying to make sure they had everything that they needed. So neither one of us really had a good picture of what that was. But as we grew in our marriage and came to understand Scripture, we started to see a more clear picture of what that looks like, and went through the bumps of learning that together, and through other examples as we got to know people. Really the clearest teaching on it, the first time that I heard it clearly explained was at a Weekend to Remember conference that Family Life puts on, and they walked through, they have separate sessions for the men and the women, and they walked through what leadership was for the men, and then submission for the women, and then you talk about it. And that made a tremendous difference in our marriage relationship. Really was the beginning of us working at it together.
And then now, obviously, you know, you both lost your spouses and then remarried, and so all the stuff that comes with that, with kids and grandkids and everything else. In your marriage now, how would you describe what that might look like, or what are some examples of what loving leadership and loving submission looks like?
Yeah, and that's the thing about it. What we're talking about in Scripture, Scripture is always meant to impact your everyday life. And so it works its way into every area of our life. We thought the best way to answer that probably is to talk about an issue that we had just last week that would illustrate how I tried to lead well, and Brenda tried to be submissive in a good way. But it centered around an issue related to my car and it having no gas and no windshield wiper fluid. And I had to be at church. Actually, we were coming here together to meet with a couple, but we had to drive individually. But I had to be here first for something beforehand. And so as I was leaving, I said, "Oh, I don't have gas in my car. So would you mind? I take your car and you take mine and put gas in it." She said, "Sure, that's not a problem." So I came to church, and as far as I knew, everything was good. And I was just waiting for Brenda to get here, and I'll let her pick up the story there.
Well, I think we have to preface the story by saying that
Always prefaces.
we had had a conversation several weeks before because his windshield washer fluid was empty. And I had said, "There's windshield washer fluid, just put it in." And he said, "Well, I need an oil change anyhow, so I'll just have them fill it when I go for the oil change." Fast forward 2 weeks, he doesn't have gas in the car. Can you drive my car and put gas in it? Sure, not a big deal, not a problem at all. So I get in the car, and I'm driving towards church, and it's slushy out, and there's a bunch of stuff flying up into the windshield, and I hit the wipers, and I can't see. I literally can't see, and I feel like I told him, I said, I'm going to die. Because I'm going down the belt line probably 60 miles an hour, and all of a sudden, there's just white on my windshield, and I can't see. And I check my rearview mirror, and I hit the brakes, and I'm kind of trying to look outside to see where I can go. Fortunately, I was able to get to the gas station, and when I get to the gas station, of course, it's midwinter, and they don't have any windshield washer fluid. So I now have to find snow to clear off my windows, and remember not to use my windshield wipers when I drive the rest of the way. So anyway, I get all that done, put gas in the car, get the windshield cleaned, and I'm driving to church, and I'm angry and frustrated, and I'm like, okay, how do I handle this when we get to church? And so I get here, and fortunately, Phil's in there talking to John.
Phil saved me for a few minutes. I didn't know it, man,
That was
but
my whole plan.
Which was a little bit of a buffer because I was still pretty hot. But anyhow, Phil left, and I said to John, and John tends to be a funny guy, and so he likes to make jokes. And I looked at him and I said, "Can you not be funny for a minute?" And I said, "Can we talk?"
which at that point then I thought, wow, what's going on? And she mentions that on the way here that she almost died, and she starts to talk about the car. So I'm thinking that it must have been like a close call, like somebody ran through a red light, somebody swerved over in her lane or something like that. And then she starts to describe that it was because of the windshield wiper fluid. So then I kind of was thinking, like, this might be a little dramatic, like she almost died. That's what I'm thinking. I didn't say that, but I just said, well, what happened? And I could tell by then that it was serious to her and that she really had felt like this was dangerous for her. And so I realized I needed. So this was, what we're trying to show is that was her being submissive. So submissive doesn't mean that you don't share your opinion, you don't be direct. And my first thought in trying to lead well was, well, it was connected to the oil change, and so I was going to get it. And she said,
"Stop." I said, "Don't talk to me about the oil change. I feel like you're being lazy."
yes. So now I have a question there. How do I lead well with my wife in a situation like this? And so I just stopped what I was thinking and doing and really tried to empathize with her. And then I just accepted the responsibility for that. And I said, okay, I'm really sorry about that. So everything's okay, though. You're okay, and confirmed that. And then I just said, I let her know that I understood how it had affected her. I said, I'm really sorry. I could see that you're kind of shaken. I don't ever want you to feel like it's dangerous for you to be in the car, and somehow I was responsible for that. And so I said, I will take care of that today. So you take your car home. I will get the oil change and get the wiper fluid filled on the way home. And then gave her a few seconds, and then I came over and I did give her a hug. She still was kind of reluctant at that point, but I just gave her a hug and told her that I loved her and that we would take care of it. And then I did let her know, because we had both been driving her car, because my car also has a ball bearing that's going bad. So it's safe, but it's really loud. and we're getting that fixed here this weekend. But I said, but I think your wiper fluid is getting low, because I had noticed that. And I said, but I will fill it when we get home. I will fill that. And we had that conversation about the wiper fluid. I did not remember that she had told me there's some in the garage and that I could do it. When I got home, I did get the oil changed. And then when I got home, I looked to find that fluid and let her know that I know it's there now, and I won't wait till the oil change to get that filled. So it ended up, when we got home, we even had a little bit more conversation about it, and it was something that brought us closer. So we thought that was a good illustration, because sometimes we think submission is the wife not having any emotion, just following along blindly. But I appreciated that she didn't come in and attack my character. She asked a question, hey, can I talk? And then she communicates, so she's getting permission and inviting the conversation, and then how she expressed it. And I was trying to lead well, and then I tried to really listen, understand what happened. I took responsibility, and then tried to communicate that I was going to take care of those things for her. So.
And you also asked for forgiveness,
Yes.
which I granted.
Yes, you did. And that's part of what we do. We don't just say, I'm sorry. We'll try to say, I understand what happened, take responsibility, and then ask, will you forgive me? So that we know that that's been asked for and granted.
And that's something too. Gary Chapman has written some stuff on the 5 languages of apology, and that's actually really helpful too, because like I remember doing a premarital counseling with a couple, and he felt like they had never, like in his family, when someone did something wrong, as soon as they would talk, they'd say, will you forgive me? And so he'd say that, and she'd be like, no, I need to process this first. And he didn't know what to do with that. And so every person tends to have, like we have love languages, tends to have languages of apology too. So you want to make sure that you're apologizing in a way that your spouse understands.
And I also would say it had nothing to do with the guy being the car guy, because actually Brenda is more of a car guy than I am. She's handy not only around the house, but she knows cars and works on different things and fixes that. So it wasn't so much that the guy was the car guy and she couldn't do it. It just actually was the timing of things and how it worked out. And I'm a well-known procrastinator, and she is let's do it right now. So if that was her car, it would have already been taken care of.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, part of your question was, what does submission practically look like? And I think for me, it's just by being John's friend and his companion, being his cheerleader, encouraging him in his work and his role as a husband and a father and his grandpa.
Yeah, and it was interesting, Sandy and I were having a conversation about that, and we said, it's hard to define submission, and really it's more of a heart condition than actual specific actions. And you mentioned that in your sermon, that the Bible doesn't give all these examples of what submission is or even what leadership is. It's more of a heart condition. And when your wife has the heart condition of submission and you have the heart condition of sacrificial, loving leadership, that makes all the difference.
Right. And that's what I would say in trying to even sum up. Maybe if we picked one word for what it means to have the responsibility of leader, it might even just be stewardship. So I'm the steward of this relationship in the sense that I'm the one who's responsible to God for it. But I think really what that means is that I'm responsible to make that there are attempts to make sure that the marriage is honoring to God. So we'll fail in some ways. I can't control what she does. She can't control what I do. But it is my responsibility to try to make sure that we are trying to have a marriage that honors God.
And you guys had kind of mentioned just how, seeing some bad examples. I think one of the helpful things about thinking about what submission is also thinking about what it's not. Like, it's not inequality. It's not one person has more power, those kind of things. It's not blind obedience. Paul tells wives to submit themselves to their husbands as unto the Lord. So the following the Lord takes precedence over the submission. So if your husband's asking you to do something that disobeys the Lord, you need to obey the Lord first. It's not complete agreement. Like that was, your story, those first 10 years, you're just saying yes, 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 but that's not really what submission is. 1 Peter 3 encourages women to win over their husbands with their behavior. So there's this idea that a good marriage actually has both people contributing and sharing their opinions and values. It's not continual deference of just, well, whatever he wants. You know, we talked about that, the idea of the 51% vote. Like, I don't see that in Scripture. Because then if you have an abusive husband, then whatever he says goes. I think this is the most important thing, too. It's not permission for your husband to abuse you. If you're in an abusive relationship, you need to get out of that. And so I think that's really important when we think about submission. And also, what we think about leadership, you know, for us, you know, as husbands, I think that call is a reminder of the call of Christ and how he led. And so, like, what does it mean to look like in leading and apologizing? Like, that's a way to lead, to apologize first, to lead in forgiveness, to be the first one to forgive, to lead in love, to lead in serving. You know, those are ways when we're doing that, then that creates an atmosphere where our wives feel loved.
Yeah. One that's sometimes hard for us guys. I really do see it as leadership, but so what are we going to watch? Who gets to control the remote control and the TV and that kind of thing? So people ask, and Brenda and I decide on the shows together. There's a couple different kinds that we rotate. So I do watch some chick flicks, TV series, and movies, and Brenda will watch some that are more the either military or war. You know, some of those. She likes some of those, but I mean, I really love those kind, and we'll actually kind of rotate. She likes medical shows. I have to turn my head. I can't look at it. I know it's fake, but when they're cutting somebody open or blood is squirting or whatever. But so we'll literally do that. Okay, hey, let's watch this one. Okay, let's watch this. When it comes to sports, it's a conversation. It's not, well, of course I'm watching these games and those kinds of things. But so in one sense, I'm just trying to give deference, you know. But in the other, I really am trying to lead and demonstrate that to be somebody who honors God is to not demand your way all the time or expect that.
Yeah. It's the idea from the sermon of making the box of your spouse more important to you than your own box.
Right. Yeah, and just to mention, if you didn't see that in the sermon, the box represented the hopes, dreams, and desires that we have, which we can make expectations and put them on our spouse or our partner, and it becomes a weight for them to carry. But true love or leadership or submission is to care more about what's in your spouse's box than your own. Do you have anything you want to say about it?
No, that's what I was going to say, that you care more about my box than you do yours.
I try.
So what are some ways, you know, the picture that Paul gives in Ephesians 5 is not just of marriage, but marriage is ultimately a picture of Christ and the church. So what are some ways that your marriage can essentially be a mission, or I like to think of it as like a billboard, you know, a billboard to the world that who God is and his relationship with the church, how can our marriage kind of be that billboard to others?
I think, first of all, you have to be intentional. When you're in a marriage that is a godly marriage, your relationship individually has to first be to God, and then as a couple, and then in your marriage. So I think to be very intentional with that becomes evident to people. I think also to be very transparent, just so that people don't know, especially, you know, for John as a pastor, and for you, you know, people sometimes will look at you like, oh, they've got it all together, you know, and just to be honest with people, like even the story we shared, you know, just to be honest with people that, hey, we're just normal people. We have the struggles too, because I think that speaks volumes to people when you do that. But then you also bring it back to, but this is how we resolve this, and this is how we glorify God in this. Yeah.
I just have to say, all I can picture is Ace Ventura, Pet Detective, when his head's out the window and he's driving like this without the. I'm just picturing Brenda with the window open.
It was not funny. I almost died.
Okay, sorry. I'm sorry. No humor for this.
It's still
one.
too early.
I forgot too early.
Still too early, Phil. No, and I would just say that again, Phil and Sandy both. You guys have modeled that for us, both in your preaching and in your marriage and life here in the church, being willing to let people see the real you. And that's what I would say again. It's not to be perfect, because none of us are perfect. But we're trying to show people that we have a way to have forgiveness, and we have in Christ all that we need to try to have a marriage that honors God. And so I do think not feeling like we can't really be a model for other people until we get it perfect, because we'll never get it perfect. So what's important is to show them what we do when we mess up, and that comes back to Christ. And then I think what Brenda said, being authentic and available then. So you don't have to say, hey, I want to, speak to a group of 100 people about marriage or anything like that. Just who's around you? Who's around that could use some help, some prayer, some encouragement? Who are you going to let see your life? And just be available to help other couples who might be going through things as well.
Yeah, I think part of our story, I've shared from the pulpit many times, the first 4 years of our marriage were just really rough and not good. And I think part of the joy that we've had is to be able to come alongside other couples and be like, hey, our marriage was horrible and now it's awesome. And to see God do what he did, and then to encourage people that God can do that in your marriage too. And I think that's one of the ways that we really, I look back at my life, and really the lowest moments and the worst moments and my greatest failures are often what God has used the most for his glory rather than my successes. So let's get some practical questions. How do I submit to my husband if he isn't leading well?
All right, so there is a diagram that illustrates this really well, and we're not going to draw that, but I'm going to attempt to describe it for you now. And at some point, we've mentioned it a couple times, but it really comes.
Should have brought the hula hoops.
Should have brought the hula hoops, yes. But there's a book called 9 Lies something, from Focus on the Family, that will destroy your marriage, and it's introduced in that book. And it's called The Healthy Marriage Model. And it really, what it does, it just brings into focus the fact that you have two people who commit their life to each other and to the Lord. And what's most important is that you draw a circle around yourself, and you, in your relationship with God, are responsible to be everything that God wants you to be. There is an interactive space between the husband and wife, and we invite God into that as well, but that is only by invitation and permission. So in other words, I need to be who God's called me to be, and then when I'm invited by my spouse to interact with them in a certain way, then I can say yes to that. And then I need to get permission when I want to go in. So even as we're talking about submission and leadership, I don't come in and just tell Brenda, here's what you need to do to be submissive. I need to be invited into that and given permission, just as she doesn't come to me and tell me I'm doing a bad job at leading in a certain way, and here's what I've got to do. So in that model, there's a circle that goes all the way around both couples and the Lord, and that really is our marriage vow that we make. So that provides security because it is for life. And so we may have some issues, some problems, we might need some help, but we're committed to this thing for life. And then there's a safety that comes in the relationship, is that interactive space between us. And as long as we work hard and honor that of trying to make that safe, so we don't push our way in, we don't manipulate, we just focus on ourselves and then interact in a safe way with each other, then we have an opportunity to have a healthy and growing marriage. And so the short answer then is there's a circle around each of the participants in the marriage as well, the husband and the spouse, and their accountability is directly to God. So when you have a spouse who isn't working at the same goal or isn't taking responsibility, the best thing that we can do is continue to focus on ourselves and invite them into that interactive space and wait for permission, but not to push our way in or try to manipulate or say, I can't have a good marriage until the other person responds. I can work at my part. So does that make sense? Anything you want to add about that?
Well, I would just say that biblical submission really has nothing to do with how your husband leads. Biblical submission is a heart attitude toward God. My responsibility is to the Lord. I cannot control my husband. I cannot control anybody for that matter. And so I just have to be responsible to the Lord for myself. And so regardless of how my husband leads, short of abuse, what Phil was talking about, abuse is never part of this equation. But short of that, really our responsibility to submit is all on us. It has nothing to do with anyone else.
And that would be true of leadership too. I think the way one person said it was, we don't need anyone's permission to be obedient to God. So we want to focus on our responsibility to be obedient and let God take care of our spouse.
Yeah, and I was gonna ask the flip side of, how do I love my wife if she's not, doing her part, but I think you guys kind of answered that. But the point is, I mean, like you said, there is the caveat, if your husband's telling you to do something that is against the Lord's will or is abusing you, then that's, that changes the category. But in general, what I see it in relationships is typically in a relationship, a husband's complaining and I want our marriage to get better, but she's not doing what she's supposed to do. And a wife is complaining and I want our marriage to get better, but he's not doing what he's supposed to do. And then that's where you get those circles. The idea is God has called me to love my wife as Christ loved the church, regardless of whatever Sandy does. It's not a clause that says, if Sandy is a great wife, I'm to love her like Christ loved the church. The command is to love her like Christ loved the church, no matter how she responds. Now, is it easier to love her when she's responding great? Absolutely. Is it easier to love your husband when he's leading well? Absolutely. But the call is still there regardless of how well or how good your spouse is on the other side. So I will ask this next question. Is there hope for a marriage if only one of the people in the couple does their part?
Yes, definitely. First of all, I would say you and I both have worked with people where that was true, and eventually the other person's heart opened up and the couple was able to be restored. But a couple of thoughts that I would say about that is it's like a ping pong game. If you and I, well, not you and I, if Brenda and I are
Play ping pong too.
playing ping pong, but if you're just hitting it back the same way every time, just hitting it straight, hitting it right in the middle, both of us can get it. That could be like a marriage where we're relating to one another in the same way. But if I change the way I hit it back to you, or you, I don't know why I keep looking at you. In a marriage, if I hit it back to Brenda differently and I put some spin on it, then that forces her to respond differently. She has to adjust how she's going to hit it back just to get it back on the other end of the table. So if we're both used to arguing, and then I just refuse to argue and I'm only going to say kind things, then most likely it's going to change the way she responds. Hopefully it will change her heart and she can start to look at communicating differently. But even if she's just kind of still mad about it or doesn't want to really talk, she'll stop arguing, because it's no fun to argue with somebody who won't argue back. So that's one part of it, that when one person changes, it does kind of force the other person to decide, how am I going to respond differently. Also, God works in somebody's heart, and he also blesses obedience, which is what we just talked about. So if I'm doing my part and I'm praying for God to continue to change me, we also are praying that our spouse will see the difference and that God will open and soften their heart. So as long as God is part of the equation, he can always bring the restoration. But even if the other person doesn't change, still the best thing that you can do in your marriage is to be who God wants you to be and honor him.
Yeah, I think usually the solution to most marital problems is, God, would you change my spouse? And like that was really the turning point for us in our marriage. Is I recognized that the thing my marriage needed most was for God to change me, and for that to happen. And I think it's interesting too. Sandy and I were reflecting. It was just recently, sometime in the last couple years, that Sandy owned up for really being part of the cause of the roughness of the first 4 years. For all that time, I had just said, it's my fault, and she'd be like, yeah, it's your fault. And we joke about it. But it was really freeing when she opened up and said, and recognized part of it. But what I try to tell guys is, I never needed that. Like if we were 80 and she never, and the first 4 years was all my fault, I would have been okay with that, because what good would it have done to like assign blame? And instead I said, I need to change who I am, and I'm going to own up to everything I've done. And part of it is just not understanding ourselves. We were really young, and so we didn't really know ourselves too well. But the point of that whole story is I think sometimes we want our spouse to own up to all their things, and they need to recognize what they did wrong. And really at the bottom of it is I want to love Christ, and I want God to change me, and I'm going to trust God to do what he needs to do in my spouse. I gave advice recently to a husband. I said, here's what I want you to do. I said, I want you to take your complaints to the Lord and give your love to your spouse. Instead of taking all your complaints about your spouse to your spouse. You know, the Lord can take your complaints. Read the Psalms. You know, it's okay to go to the Lord with those things, but go to your wife with love.
Yeah. Did you want to say anything about if you have an unbelieving spouse? From 1 Peter 3? I could just mention that. So that is one of the places we do have instruction about that. That even if you have a husband who doesn't know the Lord, it talks about your reverent and conduct, your good behavior has the opportunity to win him. And then also even Paul's instructions about should you stay with a spouse. If you're both unbelievers and one of you becomes a Christian, you know, it says if the unbelieving spouse will stay with you, then stay together. There's talk about how a believing wife sanctifies the home. So there's glimpses of the fact that a believer in a home with unbelievers, or a believer who's not wanting to live the way that they should, that you can have a big impact on them. And if nothing else, you're having a sanctifying effect on it, in that you're making your home holy, and God can use that. And the last thing I would say is in Titus 2, it talks about, there's some instruction there about older women teaching younger women and teaching them to love their husbands and to how to keep their home. And then it says, the NIV says, so no one will malign the word. And so if nothing else, what we're working on is a testimony to the world. And even if that marriage isn't functioning the way it should be, you can be a testimony of what a wife looks like or what a husband should look like. So there's more at stake than just, hey, is this working for us?
All right, so we're coming near the end here. You guys have been doing a lot with Hope Restored. You've been volunteering at We Can Remember for a long time. You've been exploring a lot of different marriage ministries this last year, just some of the different models that are out there. So would you each be willing to share either one or two things just that you found helpful, either that you've learned or relearned, or you've learned it many times, but it was just a good reminder, just something from those ministries that you found helpful?
Well, I think John already talked about the healthy marriage model. But I think for me, even when we started working with that, the initial thing, you know, you've got the circles around the individual people, and they talk about self-care. And when I first heard the term self-care, I'm like, wait a minute, that's totally not biblical. We're not supposed to care for ourselves more than we care for other people. But there's just some really good, when you start thinking about that and what that actually means, we need to care for our hearts. We need to care for our emotions and our physical and our mental and our emotional. I just said emotional, didn't I? Spiritual. ESPM, yeah. So emotional, spiritual, physical, and mental. And so we're responsible for ourselves for all of those things before we even begin to try and interact with somebody else. And so that's what it's talking about when it talks about self-care. And so that was something I had to learn because, like I said, when we first started work, I'm like, wait a minute, this just doesn't sound right. But it makes sense because it's almost like that passage in Scripture where it talks about, you know, you can see the log in, you know, or you can see the speck in your brother's eye, but you can't see the log in your own eye. If you're not taking time to, you know, to check your own heart and check your own life with the Lord, then you're never going to get anywhere with your spouse.
And then your happiness is dependent on your spouse.
Right.
You make them responsible for your own happiness.
Exactly. And then the other thing that we've learned, I don't know if I'm taking everything you thought. The other thing that we've learned is called a heart talk. Because a lot of times when people talk, they don't really talk. They don't really communicate what is in their heart. And so with the heart talks, it's kind of scripted, but it's good because it gives you the opportunity to speak what's on your heart and then for your spouse to repeat back what they just heard. And it's not fixing anything. It's not, you know, saying, oh, you shouldn't think that way or whatever. It's just repeating back what they've heard so that you know that they heard it. And if they haven't heard it clearly, they can clarify. But I think that's been really helpful. And in the couples that we've worked with, I think that's been really helpful too, because especially from the guys, because sometimes they don't really share. And so a lot of times when we get them, because it's three things, it's I feel, I fear, and I want. And when you get them talking, they both want the same thing. It's just how they get there. And so that's been really helpful as well.
Yeah, I would agree with the heart talk. Because again, we don't often take time to just share what we're feeling, what we fear, and what we want. We end up most of the time trying to talk about how we solve something. I might say what I want, but I don't say it just so she knows. I say it expecting her, again, back to the boxes. I want to hand her my box and do this. Or if she shares her emotions or just something that she's thinking about, again, I try to fix it or say, well, why would you feel that way? You don't need to feel that way. That's not true.
Sandy loves when I do that.
Yes. So that tool has been helpful, and what they talk about is it can seem scripted and really slow at the beginning, but slow is smooth, and then smooth becomes fast. So as you learn it, it can happen in a matter of seconds in those conversations. A couple other things I would mention then are great marriages don't just happen. Weekend to remember. By the way, Hope Restored is a ministry of focus on the family. It's a marriage intensive. And there's a retreat center in Greenville that we've been a part of. And then Weekend to Remember is with Family Life, and it's a weekend conference, kind of a marriage retreat at a conference center. But Family Life says great marriages don't just happen. So if we're not, Phil, I think, is good at reminding us of that if we're not intentional, if we're not investing in our marriage, if we're not working at it, then we're not going to have a great marriage. No one has a perfect marriage. Again, we know that. But we've been reminded of that, and the speakers that we've listened to, the books that we've read, the people that we've interacted with from those ministries and other marriage ministries are super helpful because they're honest, and they'll share examples that are personal and let you know that they haven't arrived as well. So that's been encouraging for us as thinking about working with married couples, that again, we don't have to have it all together. We just need to be honest with them and let them know how God's working in our hearts. And then the last one would just be that differences, whether it's gender, men and women, whether it's personality, whether it's upbringing, whether it's the way we like things, those are never really the problem. It really is, how do you handle those? And can you value the differences enough to see, as I said in the last sermon there, a Rocky quote there, that we really do have gaps and we can help fill each other's gaps. So those things that rub us the wrong way, we need to come around to understanding. We don't have to solve it. One person has said before, if we're both alike, then one of us isn't needed. So God puts people together who are different to complement one another, and I need to learn to value the differences, knowing that Brenda's differences fill in the gap somehow. Maybe I can't see it at first, but we need to communicate about it. And those differences can bring us closer together, and they actually become opportunities for oneness rather than driving us apart.
And I think the most helpful thing I learned a weekend to remember was the I feel feeling when fact is how they phrased it. But a lot of times in arguments, people will say, like, you always or you never, and then the person gets defensive and it just escalates the tension in the room. Whereas I feel feeling when fact, and we actually say it up front, so sometimes when she says that, I'm like, oh, dang it, I did something. But then she says, here's the feeling, I felt really disappointed, or I felt really hurt, or I felt like you dismissed me and didn't listen when this happened. And that's really helpful because I can't go, no, you didn't feel hurt. Like, what are you talking about? Like, and even if I think my mistake early in marriage is I was always evaluating whether her emotions were valid. Like, she would share the emotion. Well, you shouldn't feel that way. Well, she felt that way. Whether or not she should have, it doesn't matter. She still had those emotions, and those emotions were valid. The question was, how did I respond to those emotions? And so the I feel feeling fact helps us because we even say it out loud before, then we share what we're feeling, and we share why we're feeling, and then often we'll repeat back, like you said. So what you're saying is you felt this way because of this, and then you can start working on it. And the other thing that has really helped us in our marriage is to not see conflict as an enemy, but because if we are able to identify what the problem is, then now we're two people working together to solve the problem, and that builds intimacy. And usually what happens in marriages is we see the other person as the problem, and then they need to be fixed, and that doesn't work.
Your spouse is not your enemy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the whole idea about the feelings too, that's why in the heart talk you ask, so again, invitation or permission, are you available for a heart talk? And then you repeat it back, and at the end though you say thank you. You're showing appreciation that you shared your feelings. So they're not handing it to you, you're not taking it, so the way we say that is, in my heart, my problem, or my feelings is my problem. So the spouse isn't expected to fix those, but you want to hear them and you want to know, and that can change how you interact,
Right.
but you're not responsible to do anything with them. And Brenda loves to illustrate that. When we show the couple, sometimes we'll use different markers as, hey, these are my feelings, I'm just showing them to you. And we talk about how you're not supposed to just take them, but when you dismiss them, you can illustrate that by throwing the markers on the floor, and Brenda loves to throw the markers just.
It's a good illustration.
It is
Everybody
very good.
remembers it.
They do.
Well, I think it's, we think about all these things, and marriage, you always have to put in work on it. It's like owning a car. You have to get oil change every once in a while. You have to fill the wipers. You have to get tire changes.
Ouch.
There's different things you need. But a marriage is like that. If you owned a car and you never got an oil change, the car would die. And so in marriages, you have to continually work on it. And by working on it, you make it run well.
Yeah, and I think that's how I try to think about the whole thing. You started off by asking, how does loving leadership and loving submission fit together? I think we have to come back to, this is God's design, and so our greatest freedom and joy and relationship are going to come when we do it God's way. But we've been impacted by sin. We're all sinful people, so it's always going to take work to have a good relationship.
All right, any closing thoughts or any other things you guys wanted to share that we missed?
No, I think that's good.
All right, I have one more that I was going to share way back when, but I forgot. People asked about what are some examples of submission, and for me, when I think of why I believe my wife does this so well, there's a couple examples I think of. One is her words build up, and I think sometimes if it's words that cut down, what we don't realize is when you're cutting down your husband, you're actually causing him to probably not be as good of a husband or as good of a dad. There are times where she confronts my sin, so it's not like she can't be critical. She needs, but building words like lift me to new heights and make me want to be a good leader, if that makes sense. And so there's just a lot of things that Sandy does that just make me want to lead well. And that's how it works so well together. God's plan is amazing in that when both things are happening well, it actually leads to thriving of the husband and wife and the family. And so God's ways are better than our ways, and sometimes we don't understand how he puts them all together, but when they're lived out, they work great. So
Yeah, I guess I would just add one thing too. I mentioned this in my sermon. What if this is your second or third marriage? What if you've had some marriages that ended or things didn't go well? And again, just make this the best marriage that you can. I said then, make this your last one. There could be some circumstances where that's not how it plays out, but that's what you want to do. I'm going to put everything I can into this one. And then also, there is a whole different dynamic for blended families, and that can get really complicated. But I would just say that Family Life Ministry has a whole blended family area of ministry. And there's a guy named Ron Deal. You might hear his 1 minute for blended families. I think it is on the radio. But we know there's some extra complications when you blend families that can make that extra challenging. So I would encourage you to check out blended family resources at Family Life.
yeah, and I know for some of you that are listening, this is a hard topic, and maybe in the last 2 sermons were hard just because your marriage is really difficult. And we just want you to know that we're praying for you. If we know, obviously if you don't know, we're not praying for you yet, but we want to help. We are blessed right now with wonderful marriages, and seeing what God can do in and through that. And we hope that we can help others in our congregation experience that same blessing. So, all right, well, thanks for the special edition. Thank you for Brenda for being willing to have a microphone. I know it's not your forte, but thank you for John for doing this. And thank you for Sandy for giving me looks from the back.
Hey, way to go, Sandy!
And so hope this was helpful. Thanks.